The new Chinese rocket boosting vehicles are in the game with the latest update yesterday, and today's video we're going to go over why this is actually surprisingly good. This is the starting vehicle, the BZ58, and although there are some drawbacks to this tank that are very noticeable, it's actually nowhere near as kind of average or bad as I initially thought it might be when you jump into the game. So with that being said, this tank features a 320 alpha damage main armament with 195 pen as standard, with a really good 240mm of penetration with its premium rounds, which is a feature of these Chinese rocket boosting heavy tanks. And so the high penetration is basically throughout the board on all of the different tanks that you'll play, including the higher tier vehicles as well, and a slightly higher alpha as you go up through the tech tree, which is what they're all about. And of course that boost to get into position early on and try and use those strong turrets, which is what these things are supposed to have. However, starting off with the tier 7, as with most tier 7 heavy tanks, this really doesn't get a whole lot of armor, and although people can bounce off of your upper hull because it's kind of boat shaped, at least to a degree, the lower plate is gigantic alongside those cheeks of the tank right there to the left and right of the barrel are really not very good either. Even though they are 220mm thick, it can cause some bounces. You can get penned by anything above basically tier 9 easily, and of course tier 7s with their premium rounds can go through it as well, so that is definitely an issue. And then if they catch you just even angling slightly, those cheeks to the left and right of where we were looking a second ago, 150mm, and those are really weak. And then as soon as you go around to the side of the armor, it gets significantly weaker again, so 90mm, which is absolute garbage. And so if you're even looking like this, people can pen you in the turret quite easily. So although the armor on the tier 7 isn't diabolically bad, it isn't good, and so yeah, you got to kind of contend with that. But you can pull some bounces as opposed to something like an IS-2, for example, which is the other tier 7 heavy from the Chinese line. Yeah, I think the BZ58 certainly beats it in that department when it comes to armor. So other than that, what is this tank kind of all about? Well, it has decent view range on this tank. It isn't crazy good, but you can make it work, and you can spot with this tank as well. And then the one drawback of these tanks is that they do not have good DPM, 2160 on this vehicle, and that's with a commander and everything, whereas you look at the IS-2, which is the same tier and essentially with higher alpha, has 2250, and that's without a commander. So as soon as you put a commander in there, it's probably looking about 2600 DPM, so you've got about 500 less DPM, or about 25% less DPM than the equivalent Chinese heavy tank, which means your average damage that you're going to be dealing in games is going to be significantly lower, but your survivability is slightly higher. So during those games, and because of the rocket boosters, you have the opportunity to get into position slightly faster. It can actually make it work, and your overall effective DPM is probably not as bad as something like the IS-2. However, in those periods where you have used all 3 of the rocket boosters that the BZ58 gets, you'll be kind of left slower than something like an IS-2, which has 37 kilometers an hour top speed as opposed to the 30 on the BZ58. But other than that, the tank actually feels really good. Its accuracy, definitely not as bad as I initially thought they may be. We got it down to 0.33 with a 2.44 second aim time. The aim time kind of does suck in comparison to some of the other tanks in the game, but it isn't crazy bad, and in fact it is better than the high alpha IS-2. So yeah, it's more consistent when you're using the BZ58, that's for sure. Of course, let's jump into the gameplay, see how it actually plays, and I'll run you through a couple of other bits about the BZ58. So jumping into the first game that we do have for you today, we are on Wide Park. Now, Wide Park, this basically means it's going to be a low tier game. We're not going to be coming up against tier 9s. It's not available in higher tiers, Wide Park. And so what we can do is we can get into position early on. And of course we could have used the rocket booster, but at this point, I mean, most of the tanks that we're going to be finding are not going to be that far away. Now, because obviously this is a brand new tech tree line, you're seeing a lot of players actually playing in the BZ itself. And of course what we can do here is go for tracking shots and damage. That's basically what you want to do with these tanks, even more so than some of the other tanks in the game, because you are going to be wanting to get that assistance damage on top of the actual damage that you're dealing in your games, because you don't have the best DPM. So if you can improve the amount of, I guess, tracked assist that you're going to get, then you're going to get more overall damage standing if you're going for your marks of excellence, for example, and just a better experience in general. Now, there is where the standard penetration that we get with this tank of 190 does come into play. Whether if we loaded the APCR rounds that this tank actually gets as its premium, we may have been able to pen that guy a little bit more reliably. But you can see instantly, as soon as people start hitting us, we're taking a ton of damage. It is not particularly the greatest, and we go for a tracking shot on the Tiger P there for to bring us up to 1500 total damage. And kind of what you want to do is use ridge lines. If you can use ridge lines effectively, this tank becomes severely better. And of course, as soon as people get above you, however, you are going to take a lot more damage because of the fact that your armor is sloped kind of in a decent way when they're on the level terrain, but as soon as they get above, they're going to have really easy shots into both your turret and also your mantler. We're going for the cupola weak spot of the exact same tank we're playing. It is a weak point, and of course we're slightly above the BZ58 here, which allows us to get that shot into his cupola a little bit easier than if we were, you know, below or whatever. Get one into the side of the turret there. He overcommits. Looking at one of my teammates, he does take out the M4 on my team, but we do get a nice one into his side. Now at this point I'm kind of thinking that we are going to get taken out, to be honest. It's not looking all too good. We do hit the top of the tank there, but it doesn't obviously pen, which is a little bit disappointing. He does kind of bait a shot over here. The boogie comes round. He's not aimed at all, and he does manage to hit us and pen us, which is a bit unfortunate. I'd like that extra damage because that would have made us not a one-shot for the enemy BZ here. But we picked up 2,500 damage so far. And of course we picked up 450 assistance. So at this point I'm thinking, you know what, this is really not looking good. We take a shot from the BZ58, but at this point it's only one more shot that we're going to possibly get in. And here we do bounce a shot off of the Tiger P, off of the upper plate, but then someone lands the final blow on me in that lower plate. And of course you can see on the front of the tank we got quite a few shots that did actually pen through the upper plate and also through the turret, which is, you know, what you're going to expect with the tank at tier 7 trying to be a heavy. So nothing to really write home about there. But we do end up winning this game. We actually pulled out a pretty decent game out of a game where, you know, it could go horrendously bad, especially against so many tanks on this flank with minimal support, and the support that we did have was just lower tier vehicles, so not particularly ideal. It would have been nice if this BZ on my team did actually push up with me. We probably could have held that corner and I wouldn't have had to get taken out. But either way, we still win the game no matter what happens anyway, so I'm not going to complain whatsoever. And yeah, the enemy artillery does get taken out there by our friendly BZ58. But yeah, so far you kind of get the gist. The armor not so great, but the damage output doesn't feel too bad. Of course, didn't get to use the rocket boosters, but we did come top of the team with 2.8k and 485 assists, so about 3.2k combined. Let's jump into the next one where we do actually see what those rocket boosters can do and why you're going to want to play a rocket boosting tank over some of the others in a bit more of a nuanced gameplay. And so this next gameplay is on Muravanka. This is a bit of a strange one, to be honest, when it comes to playing this rocket boosting and generally heavy tanks overall on this map. It can be a little bit weird because of the fact that you don't get anywhere near as much cover to actually have brawling engagements as you do on the PC version of the exact same map, which is a little bit disappointing. But yeah, I mean, I do prefer the PC version over the console version, since there is a bit more interesting areas to go to. But we use up 2 of our rocket boosters here to get into position alongside some of the faster tank destroyers. So you can see, if you can do that early on, you can get a couple of shots. You can see the P-43 BIS over here. We're just aiming at where we could see him previously, and we land a little shot into him for 286. Now, it seems like this tank just low rolls. I mean, it definitely doesn't. Overall, it's obviously averages, but yeah, it definitely felt like I low rolled a hell of a lot during the games that we did play. We go for a kind of pot shot, a snapshot, I guess, against the Panzer IV SFL, so the toaster, but unfortunately for me, we don't manage to actually hit him. Now, here is the key issue with the tank, is that because you are so big and, you know, chunky, you do find that you are going to end up with some scenarios where you are going to be kind of outspotted by enemy tanks. You can see here we go for a shot on the Panzer IV-H, get very lucky by setting him on fire, but we did, I guess, hit the engine, so yeah, I mean, it's still lucky. But obviously if you actually fire an engine compartment of the vehicles, you are going to have that chance of setting them on fire, as opposed to if you hit them where the engine isn't. That's why a lot of the British tanks have the engines in the front, like the FV215B, the tinderbox. The reason why it gets set on fire so much is because that engine is in the front of the tank. So if you know where engines are within some of the tanks, you're going to be able to more consistently set people on fire, as much as you can, you know, RNG roll it, you know, maximizing the potential to set someone on fire. I'm not saying that you are going to guarantee it, but there is a reason why if you hit something like an FV215B, it gets set on fire more so than other vehicles. It also depends on the engine fire chance that a tank also has. So there is a couple of factors, but yeah, primarily if you aim at the engine, you're going to get people set on fire a little bit more. Now, we used our boost to kind of go through the open terrain on this map to get to where we are now. That avoids us taking, you know, as much time out in the open that some of the other tanks may do, and therefore we're going to have a better chance of surviving or taking less damage, which is what the rocket boosters are for, avoiding that damage entirely and, you know, getting out of the way, out of the combat zone as quickly as possible. You can see that the captured KV-1 is over there. He's going to definitely struggle penning us, whereas we are definitely not going to struggle against him, especially not with the premium rounds of this vehicle at all. Now, we do go for the luckiest shot of alive. We low roll to hell, and we leave him on 1 HP, which is a bit disappointing, but we do push up a little bit to see if we can get a shot onto him here. If we can land this shot right now, we are getting severely lucky, and of course we do, for the 1 damage that he had left on his tank. At this point, artillery is aiming at me. We're kind of pushing towards where the artillery is, so I'm not that surprised. You know what those artillery players are like. And so at this point, we find the enemy BZ. We go for a snapshot. You can see accuracy on the move, not very good on these tanks, so definitely don't go doing that. We could have guaranteed ourselves some damage there if we waited a little bit longer, but you know, it is roll of the dice when it comes to that. We see ourselves the AMX-13AM, which we put a round into, and then the SU-14-1 hits us there, but we are going to take the damage on the SU rather than the AMX, since he had a little bit more health, and we're up to 2.9k damage. And from this point, this is where the boosters are not so good, when you don't have those boosters left and in those later stage engagements where maybe you've already used them. However, as you go up the tiers, as you go to tier 8, you get 4 boosters. As you go to tier 9, you get 5, and you get 6 at the tier 10. So you get them more consistently. So essentially, the overall speed of your vehicle, although it remains constant throughout all of the tiers at about 30 kilometers an hour, your overall speed throughout the game can be much higher, because, you know, you're not constantly moving a lot with these heavy tanks. And when you do, you can use more boosters when you go through the tiers. This doesn't have that option, since it has the minimum amount that you can have on these tanks. However, we do have that view range, at least enough to spot a lot of the tanks that are relatively close to us, and anyone that actually fires at the time that we're within their kind of view range. and so we get some assistance damage in this game, up to 2.9k with nearly 1,000 assists, so just under 4k combined, which is definitely not a bad game for a tier 7 vehicle. And then the KV-85 on 1 health does get taken out, and of course we come top in this game with that result, nearly 1500 base XP, which is pretty good. And of course we were using the ×5 boosters to get as far along the line so I can review all of these tanks as we go along. There'll be a video coming out shortly on the tier 8 vehicle, but overall I actually enjoyed playing the BZ58 as much as I didn't think I would. And yeah, the tier 8 is even better because you don't have to upgrade the main armament of the vehicle. It comes with the top package available to you, so that's also a big bonus. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it. Of course, we'll be back with nearly daily content. I'm not going to guarantee it, but I will try my best to do daily videos every single day. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.